correction officers, especially those with additional language skills, please contact them directly. They are still recruiting. Their contact information is on the bulletin board behind the screen.
It's also part of the agenda.
Okay. The candidates know the rules. We will have some interaction, but please, we want a civil discussion. So let us begin. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to make an introductory statement. Mark, do you want to make an announcement?
No, I think you should the sheriff's department.
Okay.
Follow schedule to hear about. Thank you.
Okay. And the candidates drew numbers, and Mr. Rivera will be first. Would you please start your opening statement? Please stand up. Or you can come to the podium.
Thanks, Olga. Good evening. My name is Robert Rivera, and I had the luck of picking number 1, so that's great. I'm not a public speaker, but what I'd like to do is a moment of silence for those people that lost their lives last week at the Navy Yard. So if you please join me with that. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Being a DoD civilian myself, I know the importance and the vulnerability of each and every facility, installation, and even those in the private sector, especially like what occurred just recently in the African nations. But one of the key things that I bring as a candidate for the position of sheriff is experience not only previously with the Sheriff's Department of Arlington County. I'm paramilitary Army. For those of you that aren't Army, please don't hold that against me. 3 years active, 3 years National Guard. I've been a DoD civilian since for 11 years now. I'm a security specialist. I've worked with the Pentagon Force Protection Agency, which definitely provided me a lot of experience, not only in the security field, the contracting field, emergency management. Obviously, what happened last week would kind of fall under all of those realms, really, physical security and emergency management. I also gained a lot of experience in the contracting arena as well. Do I have anybody that speaks Spanish that needs a little bit of translation? Because if so, please identify yourself, because I am bilingual as well. Diversity is key in a department, and that is one of the things that, because of my cultural background and diverse background, are some of the things that I bring to any organization. Having lived overseas, I've learned to assimilate into various cultures, not only in the Hispanic, but also the Korean and in the Afghan. As a DoD civilian, I volunteered to go to the civilian expeditionary workforce, which means I went to Afghanistan on a voluntary basis as a civilian, which was an option that takes a lot of backbone in my book, and I think anybody else's book to do that. The position that I assumed there was that of Provost Marshal, Deputy Provost Marshal for all of the U.S. forces in Afghanistan. The entire budget, what we're seeing there, was over $175 million, and I was responsible for those of you who don't know what Provost Marshal does, it's basically like the second top cop in the country. And so that was my duty and responsibility there. A lot of interaction that I also had was with the a lot of interaction was with NATO partners as well in Kabul, which was key. Being able to operate on a common picture, yet coming from various backgrounds, and obviously that is a key factor here as a sheriff, interacting with various jurisdictions, not only in the law enforcement realm, but also in the non-law enforcement realm as well. Focus that I will have is on the emphasis on families, that not only that of the deputy sheriffs, which is key, but also that of inmates as well. Trying to work on mentoring programs. I'm sorry if I get distracted every once in a while, I want to talk you away. But mentoring programs for the inmates that might be released shortly thereafter, probably more than likely on the first-time offenders. It's something that I've already started working with communities of faith, and obviously I would have to enhance that with the OAR, which is the Offender Aid Restoration. That is an organization that supports the detention facilities as well. With those things, coupled with my focus also on trying to work on mentoring of children of the inmates as well, in order to break reciprocity. Yes, sorry, I'm very distracted. Because if not, that impacts tremendously. Just in a study in 2010, it said that the total cost for federal and local prisons was about $800 million. Total cost for inmates, last study that was done, was about $25,000 per year per inmate. So with that said, if we continue down that pace, the answer is obviously not to continuously build more detention facilities, because that's an economic burden on the taxpayers as well. Reducing recidivity also it reduces the impact on the taxpayers as well. So there's multiple factors here as a sheriff to be able to focus on and work on. Obviously, simultaneous within the time frame that I'll. Okay. Again, I'm Robert Rivera. I don't come in a fancy truck. I don't come in with anything else. I come in a 2009 minivan, and I'm one of you. I'm a citizen of Fairfax who sees an opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
May I stand in front here? Thank you. I can see the copy here.
Okay. We're trying to make sure that it doesn't go off.
Okay.
Because what's happening is it goes to sleep.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I'm just going to stand right here. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming. I don't like standing behind podiums. I like to be able to look at you eye to eye. And I promise you I probably will. You need me to speak louder, ma'am?
Microphone.
Okay. I don't. We
There's
have
a
one.
microphone over here.
There is a microphone over there?
There is no microphone.
Okay.
That's all right.
All right. I'm sorry. I'm running for sheriff. My name is Brian Wolf. I first want to tell you who I am first before what I've done. I'm a county resident. I'm a county resident since 3rd grade. I've gone to school since 3rd grade in Fairfax County Schools. My wife is a county resident. She went to school for 12 years. I'm a family man. I'm a dad. I'm a Fairfax County dad. I think a lot of things that resonate with politicians and community members of the community is that once we find out that a politician wants to go ahead and run for office, that if they have a connection to the community, we automatically draw to that candidate. And I think that's apparent in almost every election. I am that person. I am a community servant for Fairfax County. I'm a community dad and I'm a community husband. Early on in my life, I was raised by one parent. My mother is the one that raised me. She raised 4 kids on a salary of $2.10 an hour. That's what was her minimum wage back then. She raised 3 boys and 1 daughter. And we made it. And we've all been successful. Today is a victory for me today just to stand in front of you. This is my first debate. And I want to thank both candidates for showing up for today. What I did back in my early life is I worked in the businesses in Fairfax City. I washed dishes. I got promoted one time after washing dishes for 4 years. I got promoted to be a maid at the Patton Motor Hotel in Fairfax City. I wasn't scared of work. I delivered newspapers early in the morning before school. After school, my brother and I, we drove to Springfield Mall, where we washed dishes for Pharaoh's Ice Cream. Then I moved over to Chesapeake Bay Seafood House in Fairfax City. I'm not afraid of work. But you know what? We couldn't help our mom enough. And when my brothers and I decided we need to relieve my mother of a little bit of the strain on her financial ability, we both went into the service. He went into the Army and I went into the Air Force. I was successful in the Air Force. I was a military police officer. My dream job. I wanted to be a Fairfax County officer in my own jurisdiction. I wanted to live in my jurisdiction. I've always felt Fairfax is my home. I moved around the entire world with my father as a military brat. His last base was here in 1973. Since then, I've been here, except when I served in the Air Force. I moved away one time early in the 80s because I couldn't afford Fairfax County housing. I went to Front Royal, but other than that, 8 years in Front Royal, the rest of it's been here. I entered the police department right after I got out of the Air Force in 1986. And I retired in 2011. I've received several awards, including Police Officer of the Year twice. And I also have received 130 written accommodations for distinguished service. I was a sergeant in almost every capacity of the police department. I was on the honor guard. I was on EST. I was a sniper. I served under four chiefs who had different styles of contemporary type of leadership. I was exposed to 5 different exposures, or excuse me, 4. Actually, it was 5, because I did work for Fairfax County for 3 years in their narcotics section. So 5 different chiefs, I've seen what works and what doesn't. I see what empowers employees and what doesn't. I'm tossing out what doesn't. I'm going to use what does. I have a fantastic department. I'm proud of them. I'm proud of my daughters. I've got a big family. I've got one starting second year of medical school, and I've got one starting the 2nd grade. That's diversity, folks. 63 years in public schools in Fairfax County. I've got 21 more years. My kids go up to Fairfax County. I've got 6 seconds, and I'll thank you, and I hope I get your vote.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stacy Kincaid, and I am a 26-year veteran of the Fairfax Sheriff's Office. I graduated from Langley High School in McLean, and I received my college degree from Frostburg State University. I interned with the Fairfax Sheriff's Office when in college, and that was the start of my career in law enforcement. After I successfully completed training at our academy, I began my work in the Adult Detention Center. And over the course of my career, I have worked in all 4 divisions, as well as worked in both administrative and operational capacities. I am currently serving in the rank of captain. Many people have asked how the Sheriff's Office differs from the police department. While we receive the same training at the academy as the Fairfax County Police, we then receive additional training which certifies us to perform the 3 core functions that are unique to the Sheriff's Office. Those core functions are managing the Adult Detention Center, providing courthouse security, and serving civil law process. We do those functions well. We run a model facility. In fact, our most recent successful national accreditation was announced just yesterday. We keep our courthouse, judges, and the 6,000 or so daily visitors safe. We serve civil process in a conscientious and fair manner. But all that is not enough in the 21st century. If we stand still, we are losing ground. So, how as sheriff will I move the office forward? First, Fairfax County is a very diverse county. The Sheriff's Office in Fairfax is the largest, so we must respect and reflect our diversity. As an elected officer, the sheriff is in a unique position to cultivate a close relationship with residents. As your sheriff, I will be out with community listening and learning. I believe in working collaboratively with residents to create safer communities. There's nothing more crucial to the success of a sheriff's office than the partnership with the communities we serve. I will establish a volunteer outreach team to recruit volunteers from ethnic communities. Failure to recognize and reach out to the community can foster resentment among residents and lead to a breakdown of trust. And our communities can help us better serve our inmates. Our business community can help train our inmates with the skills to become gainfully employed upon release and reduce recidivism. I will also work with our mental health communities so the jail does not remain the default healthcare provider for our vulnerable residents. Second, I have a long history of community outreach and collaboration with groups, both internal and external, of the Sheriff's Office. I was appointed the first occupational health and safety officer and peer support coordinator for the office. where I work with the medical community, the police and firefighters, other government agencies, and families to establish a program. I received the Outstanding Performance Award for my leadership. I also serve on the governing board to prevent and end homelessness. And I know the importance of finding permanent shelter for our homeless population, some of whom have served time in our jail. I've been recognized by the Sisters Network of Richmond for my support of breast cancer research in African American women. I am a graduate of Leadership Fairfax, and I'm also the recipient of the Distinguished Service Award, which is the highest award given by the Sheriff's Office. Finally, in this economy, the Sheriff has to make sure that the taxpayers' money is being well spent. As Sheriff, I will review contracts, processes, and practices to find efficiencies and savings. We are working now on upgrading our technology in the Adult Detention Center, and I expect that to lead to greater efficiencies. We are also in the process of implementing a kiosk system that includes video visitation that will allow for more frequent contact between an inmate and his or her family. It will also handle inmate requests for medical attention and a host of other capabilities that will make our jail run more efficiently. We have a stellar Sheriff's Office with outstanding professional employees. I pledge to continue the office's history of excellence while continuing to seek out and improve it wherever possible. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for any of these three candidates? You want to read your question? Okay.
You were elected, and the new rules proposed by the FCC do not go into effect. What action would you take regarding jail inmate telephone rates?
Ms. Kincaid first? Okay. Reverse order. Okay. Consequently, I am responsible for the oversight of our inmate programs section right now, and I'm also responsible for the inmate telephone contract. And I can tell you that when I do go into office, I will ensure that, and as I mentioned previously, we're not going to profit on the backs of our inmates. We're going to make sure that inmates, our inmate population, has the opportunity to contact and have interaction with their families, because it's a way for them to it helps reduce recidivism, and it also helps them while they are incarcerated. So regardless of that, whether or not it goes into effect, I will work hard to ensure that it's fair and equitable.
Okay. That's a very good question. Captain Hayes just basically said she was in charge of that program, where we apparently is the highest charged facility in Fairfax County. So if she wants to take credit for that program, I let her go ahead and do that. I don't think we have to be the highest. I've monitored jail recordings for 26 years. That's part of our investigative tool. I can tell you there's usually like about 30 seconds of business, and the rest of it can go as long as 10 minutes of pleasure calls. I'm not in favor of making pleasure calls to the inmates. I do believe they do need to contact their attorneys, their family members, to keep and restore their family members' home style going, whether it's for getting their medications. And I don't believe hours and hours of commissary credit to go ahead and speak to family members for going on nightly on it. I've listened to these jailhouse tapes for investigative purposes. The inmates know that we're listening. They get a recording I'm sure the captain can tell you, I forgot. They get a recording advising them that their conversations are being monitored. And I'm sure that we can develop a policy and a procedure of jail calls that are suitable to the inmates and to the county citizens. Thank you.
Ma'am, That is definitely a good question, and I think the question that we need to really clearly define is the word profit. In regards to where the monies went, or where they go, needs to go, they're not spent frivolously at all. I mean, all the money that's acquired as through that program is utilized for maintenance of equipment, replacement of current equipment that's malfunctioning, that needs updating. Bottom line is, if those funds don't come from there, who do you think they're going to come from? The taxpayer. So it's not a matter of trying to make additional money or anything like that. It's a matter of last time I checked, we all paid phone bills. I mean, so there's no difference there. Yes, the circumstances are different. However, if the money does not come from a source, unfortunately, it would be levied upon the taxpayers. And those, as a sheriff, you have a responsibility to minimize as much as possible the burden on your sheriff's department within reason.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any other questions? No other questions for these candidates?
I have a question. I feel like background checks and gun control might be an issue particularly important to Sully. Of course, we had an incident here several years ago, and of course, we've had students go to the Virginia Tech incident. So I was just curious, I guess, whether you all support background checks for guns, universal background checks for guns, especially since in our state there's a gun loophole, and whether or not you're a member of an organization like NRA that supports that or that is against universal background checks.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I definitely believe that a background check should be in place. The key factor there, which we not only saw last week, but we continuously see, is the lack of reporting when it comes to mental health. But that is the kind of the area that needs to be closed, and that is something that as sheriff, I would definitely look at working on closely with medical community, with other agencies reporting. There needs to be some means of checks and balances for people who are undergoing mental treatment in order to avoid that loophole. Nothing's going to prevent somebody from coming to Virginia if there's nothing on the record, nothing that says prevents that person from purchasing one, because legally they would be entitled to stop them. And as a sheriff, I would have that responsibility, not only me, but collectively. Every law enforcement chief and sheriff within Virginia should be working on that, because Virginia, a lot of times, that's where the firearms are coming from, Virginia.
Can I speak over here? And if that's this woman can't hear? Okay. Very good question. I support the Second Amendment. I think the founders of this country knew what they were doing when they decided to go ahead and add that as an amendment. The background checks I am in favor of for misdemeanors of crimes of violence and felonies. Other than that, I believe that citizens have a right to buy and purchase if they're law-abiding citizens. The loophole, I don't believe that these mass shootings are basically the responsibility of law-abiding citizens that are buying guns in Virginia. My whole platform in my website and for this whole campaign is mental health. Mental health is the problem with background investigations. We can't go ahead and find some way to record that and put that in our background checks. That's protected by the federal government. And until we do that, I am all for protecting the lives of soft targets throughout the United States. The only way we can do that is keep mentally ill people from being able to purchase and obtain firearms.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kincaid.
In reference to your question, I do support expanded background checks. As sheriff, our job is to enforce the law, don't make the law. In reference to the question, am I affiliated with any organization, and I'm assuming that it's probably the NRA that you're referring to. I do not belong to any organization of that magnitude. So that's my answer.
Okay, thank you. In reference to the time that we promised for the House delegate candidates, please join me in giving these candidates a hand. outside on their website.
We're gonna start this here, the time will be here, time number 5.
Okay.
You'll see.
Hi, I'm Patrice Winter. Wasn't it a beautiful day today? It
What?
was just gorgeous. I started my morning at Inova Fairfax. I work at George Mason University. I'm on loan there. I do research with breast cancer survivors and liver disease, folks with liver disease. So I was there and then finished with a research patient, and then I went to George Mason University. And today was the 5th annual Captain Heart Walk. I am one of a couple people that we started 5 years ago. It's a health initiative for faculty, staff, and students. And from there, I went to teach. I have about 90 students on Wednesday afternoons, and the course is Introduction to Healthcare Professions. And so there, we did a little bit of healthcare, we did a little bit, they had a test today. So it was a little bit, I had about an hour of free time. And then went to work on my campaign at 4 o'clock. So I digress, I have a script. Thank you to Sully District Council and the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. And I really thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Like I said, I'm Patrice Winter. I'm a mother, an educator, and a local businesswoman, and I'm a former elected member of the Fairfax City Council. And I am now a candidate for the 37th District for the House of Delegates of Virginia. I am passionate about community service and have been engaged in my community for as long as I can remember. During my 3 terms on City Council from 2002 to 2008, and throughout my professional career, I have built a strong record of addressing healthcare issues, improving education, and advocating for small business owners. Healthcare is an issue at the forefront of public attention across the United States, and I am deeply concerned by the direction the federal government has taken in regards to healthcare. I've spent over 35 years as a healthcare professional, and I am nationally recognized expert in the field of physical therapy. I understand the critical need for quality health care to be available to all citizens. I support the efforts of the Commonwealth in fighting the implementation of the Affordable Care Act via the expansion of Medicaid. This expansion without reform will inevitably cost taxpayers a great amount in the long term and create a shortage of medical personnel and make it more difficult for patients to receive adequate care in a timely manner. Citizens deserve to have the best care at the best price. The current direction of this country is headed will not put our healthcare system where it should be, and one of the best in the world. Virginia needs to be a leader and an example of best practice in healthcare. Another issue of priority is small businesses. Forbes recently released a report today, in fact, which ranked Virginia #1 best state to start a business. Forbes credited the Commonwealth with its vast technology resources, educated population, and tax structure. As a former business owner and job creator for 17 years, I understand the impact the government has on business and owners and must be available to operate with as little government intrusion as possible. As your delegate, I will work to ease tax burdens on small businesses, minimize unnecessary in place businesses by the state government. I am a strong believer in encouraging the entrepreneurial spirit of all Virginians and will work to promote a strong business climate for our Commonwealth. And finally, education. I was actively involved in the Fairfax Public Schools throughout my 2 children, the years they attended, and as a faculty member at George Mason University, which is entirely in the 37th District and currently the largest university in the Commonwealth, I understand the importance of quality education. We should be proud of our schools in Virginia's 37th District. The Commonwealth has the best education in the U.S., ranked 1st in the nation in higher education and 4th in the nation in K-12. FCPC schools have a national reputation for quality teachers, excellent curriculum, and first-rate facilities. I support the strong public schools in our area. However, we need to ensure all students receive a quality education. I have concerns with Virginia's current educational funding index policy, where Northern Virginia's public schools are shortchanged in regard to funding we receive for education. I will work to keep more education funds in Northern Virginia. Many have said that we need more healthcare professionals, business owners, and educators in Richmond to provide expertise on any reform or new legislation. I am all three. I hope I earn your trust, your support, and your vote November 5th. Thank you.
We'll do it from there.
I'll move over here. Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I want to again thank League of Women Voters and Sully District Council, and I've always enjoyed coming to the Sully District Council after the General Assembly session to do our legislative wrap-up. And I also want to thank Patrice. We've been friends for a good decade or so, and it's been a very positive race, and we're going to continue to be friends no matter what happens on November 5th. It's been a privilege to serve as the representative for the 37th District for the past 8 years, and worked down in Richmond on some very important issues, and have served on committees and commissions that are important to the everyday lives of Virginians. And so I sit on the Education Committee, I sit on the Housing Commission, Natural Resources Committee. Probably most important for what we're doing today is I also serve on the Joint Healthcare Commission down in the General Assembly that's dealing with things like Medicaid expansion. And we are making those Medicaid reforms, and I do support expanding Medicaid to cover those 400,000 people who are uninsured in Virginia to make sure they get the preventative health care that they need. Just by way of background, I grew up just south of George Mason University, went to Robinson High School where I met my wife, and after I came back from college, we wanted to settle down in the same community that I grew up in. It was a fantastic place to live, and we wanted to raise our 3 kids in the same place that we enjoy great schools and great parks. And so both of us actually decided we wanted to give back to that community and get involved in civic activities. And so I joined Rotary, got active in PTA, youth sports, served on the Brain Injury Services Board of Trustees, and actually still serve on that. It's a great organization that helps those with traumatic brain injuries, including some of our soldiers coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq. And also served as the chair of the Fairfax County Consumer Protection Commission for 7 years. And it was that civic pride and engagement that I wanted to be able to take to the General Assembly. When I first got elected, I made 3 basic promises, which was to listen, to work hard, and to always keep the best interests of my constituents at heart. And so I've made sure that I'm always out there and accessible to my constituents. That's everything from formal constituent surveys to town hall meetings to informal coffee office hours. Down in the General Assembly, I've really focused on the bread and butter things that I think we all care about. For transportation, I was very proud to support the bipartisan transportation bill that got passed this year that's going to put $300 million each year into untangling our roads here in Northern Virginia, including I-66 and 28. And was also successful in getting a bill through to reduce red tape with regard to the review of local projects, which will save time and money. We've got a lot more work to be done, especially with regard to the Commonwealth Transportation Board, but I think for the first time in a generation, we're on the right track. Education, just like Patrice said, there's no better investment that we can make in the education of our children. I've worked very hard to try to get that fair share of funding, or at least try to have less of it taken away from us, quite frankly. And I've also passed legislation to reduce some of the administrative mandates on our schools that are unnecessary so that money can go directly to our classrooms. Class sizes need to be kept low, and I'm committed to making sure that happens. There's lots of other bills that I'd love to go into, but 2 of the ones that I'm most proud of are helping to protect people from identity theft. And also, Virginia, unfortunately, is a place where human trafficking happens much too often. Most people don't do this. I know that you know this is an issue that you focused on, and that's something that I've worked hard over the last couple years to strengthen our programs for that. Looking ahead, for the economy, we're doing better than we did before, but I think we can keep things going. And there's 2 areas that I want to focus on. One is small businesses. There's a couple taxes out there that really do hurt investments from our small business community. One is the machinery and tools tax, which serves as a disincentive to investing in machinery and infrastructure. The other is the B-poll tax, which is a gross receipts tax. It really hurts small business. Right now, there's a study in the General Assembly for how we can replace those with a more 21st century style of taxation, and I think we need to move in that direction. I also want to make sure we're taking advantage of the fact that we've got great research universities here in Virginia and strengthening the relationships between them and our business community. Last but not least, we have an opportunity this year, and I think nobody likes what's happening in the headlines with regard to some of the ethics issues done in Richmond. And Virginia has always been a state that I've been very proud of, and I think we are very proud of the fact that in large means we have a great government. And we just need to make sure that we're taking this opportunity to see some of the weaknesses in our law and strengthen some of our ethics laws. Anyways, thank you very much for coming out. Look forward to your questions and listening to the rest of my colleagues.
Go ahead, number 3. We go over here.
Thank you very much for having me here to lead women voters and the Sully community. It's a pleasure to be able to speak before you. First, I want to thank my opponent, Tom Ross, who I've known for years, and he's definitely given a lot to our community, and I certainly want to appreciate that. I come from a mixed marriage. My father is an Episcopal priest and a very strong Democrat. My mother is a nurse and comes from a very Republican family. So you can imagine the conversations that happened around our table as we were growing up. Speaking about politics, community service, involvement in our surroundings was always a high priority, and I was raised with a strong sense of social justice and responsibility for participating in my community. I got my first start in taking action was when I was in 6th grade in Hot Springs, Arkansas at Jones Elementary School. Back in the 1970s, when I was in the 6th grade, only boys were allowed to be crossing guards at my school. And I gathered my girlfriends up, organized and spoke to the principal, explained to him that I and my girlfriends wanted the same opportunity that the boys had. And before the end of the year, I was installed as the first alternate as a girl. And after that, it was a co-ed program ever since. That's the way I've lived my life, standing up for other people, speaking out, and trying to make a difference where I live. I attended Hollins College, which is a women's university in Roanoke, Virginia, and my first job out of college was working on Capitol Hill for Senator Richard Shelby. My husband and I met in Washington, and we have been married for 20 years. We have 2 daughters. One is Sophie Claire, sitting in the audience with us. The other is Anna, who is a sophomore in college. And I spent the past 19 years basically focusing on my girls and on my community, being active in making a difference. So I've been on the PTA board at Herndon High School. I'm on the Diocesan Council at St. Timothy's Episcopal Church, and has served as a Stevens minister, helping people going through crisis. I'm an officer in the Fortnightly Club, which is the oldest women's club in Virginia. But really, I'm most proud of, besides being a parent of Hannah and Sophie Claire, is my work with Supervisor John Faust, who is the Dranesville District Supervisor. Over the past 5 years, I have worked at the community level, helping people solve their problems. Didn't matter if they were Republicans, Democrats, if somebody needed a pothole fixed, they called me and I got VDOT out there to make it happen. A few examples of the work that I've been able to do. One is with the innovation station, the proposed metro station. I made sure that the right people were at the table from the community, the folks who live closest to it, the community leaders, people so that the town of Herndon had a voice. And I, along with the senior staff from Fairfax County, from Loudoun County, from the town of Herndon, VDOT, and the airport, worked together to create the comprehensive plan and to also look interjurisdictionally to create some new plans for reducing congestion, working with the local level. I also have worked with senior citizens over the past 3 years, helping them learn how to stay in place so that they wouldn't have to move to a nursing home. Maybe you've heard of the Village Movement. It's something that's taking place all over the country. We work with community leaders, businesses, nonprofits to help harness energy and resources that are not using tax dollars. I, though, have been watching what's happened in Richmond watching us on Saturday Night Live and The Daily Show, getting very frustrated with what's happened. So I decided to put my money where my mouth is and run for office. I want my daughters to be able to make personal decisions for themselves. I want them to be able to come back and live here and have an affordable housing, be able to get a good job, and I want to be able to use our transportation system to make sure that it's fully functioning. I hope you'll come out and vote. I hope you'll be a part of the process, do the research to understand what policies are in play, and I thank you very much for your time. My name is Jennifer Boysko. My website is jenniferboysko.com. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Tom Rust. I'm finishing my 6th term in the House of Delegates. I'm a civil engineer, a business owner, and I think both of those things have helped me in the General Assembly. Jennifer, thank you for the very kind comments. I don't move around much. I live in Herndon. I've been in the same house for 36 years, so that's a little unusual. Let me tell you a little bit about my experience. I was the mayor of Herndon for a long time. During that period, I built the municipal center downtown, also with Fairfax County, joined with them doing the library. I did the community center, I did the senior housing, I did the golf course, I did all the recreational facilities around the community center. I mentioned that, and I will come back to it. The second thing that I did before I came to the General Assembly was be active in higher education. I was on the Board of Visitors for Longwood College for 8 years. 7 of those years I was the rector, which is a fancy word for the chairman. I was also on the Virginia Tech Board of Visitors for 6 years. I did resign from that to go into the General Assembly, and I was the vice rector of that, and in line with the rector of the Board of Visitors. I mentioned those two things. If you look at my records, you will see I have been involved a lot in infrastructure, which is what I talked about in Herndon, and higher education, which I've talked about at both Tech and Longwood. In the General Assembly, I'm on 4 committees. Fairly unusual for a member to have 4 committees. Transportation, Education, Commerce and Labor, and Science and Technology. I'm also the co-chair with Senator Hogan from Prince William County of the Northern Virginia delegation. I also chair Jay Cox Joint Commission on Technology and Science. And as of today, I'm the ranking majority member of 2 of those 4 committees. The experience counts in the Virginia General Assembly. It really does count. Let me talk a little bit about my accomplishments, and the clock just died on me. Let me talk a little bit about things I've done in the General Assembly. I mentioned education. I've worked with the governor on the Top Jobs 21 legislation, which set the goal of 100,000 new degrees by 2025, kept tuition low. The last 2 years been the lowest in a decade. I did the dual enrollment deal, which you're going to hear a lot about. A lot of kids are doing dual enrollment in high school and in the community college system. Very interested in STEM, which TJ21 talked a lot about. The articulation agreements, which I hope we get to talk about. All those things have helped our kids get through higher education quicker and cheaper. Transportation, I look around the room, I see a lot of people that come every year. That's what we always talk about is transportation. This year, we did the landmark transportation bill in 2013, which I was a patron of, and with Delegate Lamunian and others wrote the Northern Virginia portion of that bill, which in essence says money raised in Northern Virginia stays in Northern Virginia and is spent in Northern Virginia on projects picked by Northern Virginians. K through 12, again, reading specialists. If you cannot properly read by the 3rd grade, you're in trouble. So we put additional resources into reading. Delegate Lamunian did the algebra readiness, which is also critical to STEM. As Patrice said earlier, we just were ranked about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 4th best in the nation system K through 12. I'm very proud to say we're also number 1 in the nation in higher education. We did a 2% raise for our teachers this year. Jobs and economy, I am running out of time. I'll just be very, very brief. Forbes rated us #1 today, best state to do business in, and the reasons for it, I'm convinced the transportation bill that we did, which I was a patron of, the tort reform, which I hope we talk about, was a part of it, and right to work. We strengthened the right to work laws. What I'm going to work on in 2014 is getting STEM education in partnership with the community colleges down to the 5th, 6th, and 7th grades, with particular emphasis on women and minorities. Thank you for listening. I look forward to working with you, and I look forward to answering your questions as we go forward. And I have 6 seconds left. Thank you all.
Wood number 4. 5. Ed, what was your number? Okay. I didn't know that I go like that. Okay.
Thank you. I'll stay here, okay? I'm Jerry Folks, running as a Democratic candidate for the House of Delegates in District 40. I'm running against Tim Hugo, who's been in the office for 10 years. I'm a retired pastor of the United Church of Christ. I've been ordained and have standing for 44 years. I've served 5 congregations in Maryland, Virginia, and New Jersey. And I've always been a community activist. In New Jersey, I was elected to the school board, served for 3 years, president for 1 year. It was a nonpartisan election, but it was a very conflicted school board, so the trade-off, you might say. But I learned to work with administrators, and through them with the teachers, and support the education program in the school system in Willingboro, New Jersey. I also, while I was there with the church, organized a nonprofit food co-op. Another example in Virginia and Woodstock, where I was for 13 years, organized a Habitat for Humanity chapter where I was president for a time. So I've been involved in the community in many ways, and been in Senator for 17 years, where I started Wellspring United Church of Christ with the help of many other good people. And while we were there, I've been involved in the community more and more in politics, helping with different campaigns, and decided last year that this would be a good year to run for House of Delegates. I mentioned the experience in the church because as I talked to people at the doors, I realized, if I hadn't before, how much my experience working with congregations spills over into the kind of work I anticipate in the House of Delegates. I work to build consensus when we would have to make decisions, coming to meetings with different points of view. Sometimes the decisions may seem a little silly, sometimes very important. We spend money from time to time, actually. So we had to come to a consensus, or else we'd have a divided congregation. And that kind of value of building consensus, to me, means a lot. A house divided against itself can't stand. I think Abraham quoted the Bible saying that. But that experience, that means a lot to me as I work with others in the community and as I anticipate in the House of Delegates. A few years ago, our church, my wife Alice, who's here taking pictures, thank you, Alice, and other good people in the community, other churches and foundations, got together over a period of time of meetings and actually organized a labor resource center, a free, non-tax money put into it, a free operation to get workers off the street, where they could be hired fairly and paid fairly with no record of wage theft over the 2 years of operation. Again, no tax money was paid. It was a local problem with a local solution. And it's an example of how we can work together as volunteers, as people of good hearts and good intentions. And I'd like to carry that experience with me wherever I am, and as a delegate, not just in Richmond, but in the community where I have a chance to reach out to people and work together to solve problems. I look for where the needs are, and glad to be a part of and collaborate with others to solve problems in our community. Transportation is, as we've all said, I think is one of the most important issues, and I'm glad to see and I really support the bipartisan funding bill, which was, to me, an example of an actual compromise. We've had too few experiences of good compromises like that, where not everybody got everything they wanted. Some people maybe didn't like parts of it, but we all came away with something for our community, for Northern Virginia. And I look forward to being a part of helping to spend that money wisely and carefully. And not just for putting asphalt on roads, that's one way sometimes it's carefully done, but also looking at the whole picture, the whole matrix of transportation needs in our region. We need to be sure that we're supporting public transportation as much as possible. Some areas of my district have no access to public transportation. You have to have a car or a horse cart or something. And there's no road, some roads have no way you can ride a bike on them safely. So I'm interested in looking at the whole picture of transportation. Thank you. The schools are important to me. My wife was a retired public school teacher. I have 3 grandkids here in Centerville in public school, 2 at Westfield and 1 at Londontown Elementary School. And so education is important. I think we need to make sure we're not creating unfunded mandates from the state to our school system, which increases class size and limits the teachers you can have. We need to do more to make testing appropriate for the students so that we know what they need to learn, and also allow and support problem solving and creative thinking, as well as supporting art, music, and phys ed, which are important to our whole education of the whole person. So thank you all very much for being here and a chance to share with you, and I'm glad to receive any questions you might have. Spokesfordelegate.com is the website, and look forward to your support. Thank you.
Everybody, thank Delegate Simju, and I appreciate y'all putting this on tonight. I appreciate the Sully District Council and the League of Women Voters. It is good to be here. For those who don't know me, I've been doing this about 10 years. I had an opportunity of electing a special election in 2002 In my day job, what I do is I provide tax returns for low and moderate income Americans. We have a partnership with the IRS, private companies. Last year, we provided about 3 million free tax returns to Americans. We've done about 35 million over the last decade to folks. It's a good opportunity. If you look at the House of Delegates, it's a wide array of people. Everybody's got different passions, different ways of approaching things. Some people focus on, they get far out on issues one way or the other. I try to focus on the things here in the district. And I think I see a lot of you around the room that I've worked with them issue after issue after issue on things that are important to you over the years. Couple years ago, we had a problem with Virginia Run where there was a lot of wrecks. So we got VDOT to reline the road for them. 2 years ago, there was a problem where we thought the kids might be getting hit when they were crossing the road there by the pool. We got the bump out there to make sure of that. We worked on the pigging station there when the gas company was going to put the pigging station in there. We worked on project after project. Gate posts had a problem a few years ago. We went to it because they were losing power. So we went to the power company, electric company, made sure they rewired it. Now they get electricity from 2 sources. They had a problem getting in and out of the neighborhood. We worked on that. Just last week, they had a problem with their sewer system. There was a smell. We worked on that. I focus on things here in the district. Mulford School, I focused on that. Getting in and out of the area, I focused on that. I don't know if you've seen, a lot of you've seen out in Prince William, I also represent part of Prince William. Been big on the fight on the north-south corridor. It's something important in my district. I'm going against the governor, the Republican governor. I'm going against my governor. I'm going against my Secretary of Transportation because I think it's the right thing to do. And I'm going to go with it again for any of you for Virginia Run. We're going to take the fight to them on that traffic circle. I think there's a lot of problems with that. And I know I've heard from Virginia Run. We've been open to try to get some sort of transportation improvements there. But what I think is a traffic circle in that area will be problematic for all the neighbors who currently live there. And so we're going to work with the Secretary, work with the governor. But if they won't work with us, we're going to push back on it and continue to do that. I think, as I said, I try to focus on the nuts and bolts, kind of the common sense problems that things people have, work on their day-to-day solution. But one of the other things that I try to do, work on, is things that I think government should be doing. I'll tell you point blank, I don't think government should be doing a lot of things they do. But there's certain things they should do. They should be trying to help those who can't help themselves. Over the last decade, I've worked hard on an issue on autism. If you look, and Dave and I have talked about this, I was the deciding vote that got the autism bill to the floor. We have a special commission, and it was time. We had Democrats and Republicans voting to kill that bill. And I had a mother come in and testify. And she said, and I was chairman of the committee, she said, I got 2 kids. I can only afford to pay for one. How do I choose?
If any of you have seen Sophie's Choice, I just couldn't tell her she couldn't choose. So I voted against the business community when I thought it was the right thing to do, and brought the autism bill to the floor against the law of Virginia. In the last 3 or 4 years, I had a friend of mine come to me, David mentioned it, on the sex trafficking, human trafficking. Human trafficking. That's something that I thought happened in Thailand or somewhere way across the ocean, some faraway land. It's happening here in Virginia, and it's happening in Southern. We looked and found out Virginia has some of the weakest laws on this. And what we did is in the last year, last 3 years, we passed a number of laws, Democrats and Republicans working together to get this done, to make Virginia now having some of the better laws, best laws in the country on human trafficking. We're going to work with that. I try to work with the cross-section of folks. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. I've got on that traffic circle, I've talked to people day after day that I know have donated to every opponent, supported every opponent. That's fine. Because that fighting that traffic circle is the right thing to do, Democrat or Republican. I am supported by a lot of different groups. I'm proud to have the support of traditional Democratic groups like the FEA, Fairfax Education Association, Virginia Education Association, have the NFIB, the Chamber rated me A. We have the police, we have the bank, the Northern Virginia Technology Association, the credit union. And today I was pleased, and Jerry, I appreciate your service as chaplain to the Fairfax station here, firefighter station. But I was pleased that the local firefighters today endorsed me as he's a firefighter, joining the state firefighters. Again, I work with a lot of groups, and I will continue to. I thank you for hosting this today. I look forward to your questions, and I look forward to the opportunity to give me the opportunity to serve you. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Pumpkin Nguyen. I am running for the House of Delegates in the 67th District to replace Jim Levin. Very simply put, I have been a community activist all my life. I was an altar boy when I was a child, worked at church, served our communities, did some translation for our community members, and as I've grown up, I continue to do that community service as an adult. I studied to be a Catholic priest for 11 years of my life as a result of being inspired by the priest at my church. And so I said, you know what, I want to be like him. I want to continue to be able to serve other people in my community. Obviously, I opted not to go down that career path. I took some time off, decided to not continue, eventually got married and moved here to Virginia. And I continue to do community service throughout my life. And right now, running for office is not about running to be a politician. I'm running and campaigning to be the representative of the 67th District. It's very simple. There's a lot of needs in our communities, and it's about getting results done. Transportation, education, and economies are my platform and my issues that I'm concerned about. Simply put, I live over on Stringfellow and Route 50. So practically any time of the day, if I drive down Stringfellow, I encounter traffic. Other times of the day, I drive down Route 50, I encounter traffic. So it's about getting things done. So those areas have been congested for a very long time. They've been fully funded by our previous friend Chuck Pluto, and yet the construction sites are still going on. So the question becomes, when will they get done? Some folks saying a year, some folks saying 2 years. I'll believe it when I see it. As a person who focuses on community service, it's all about results. Working with nonprofits, you have limited budgets, you have limited resources, and you have to get the biggest bang for your buck and get results for it. And so one of the things I want to do when we go down to Richmond is to focus clearly on our budget and not just move money from one pot to the other pot instead of rebalance the budget. The priority is education. If education is a priority for us, then we need to make sure that education is fully funded. Not just one-time funding, and then next year we have to go find where that funding is going to be coming from. Because that's putting our children at risk, it's putting our families at risk. And so those are the things that I am focused on, is putting our money where your mouth is, basically. As a taxpayer, I don't mind paying my taxes, but I want to make sure that we get the results for it, the biggest bang for our buck for those things. And so again, it's about public service. Like Dave, I serve on the Consumer Protection Commission. I served on it for the last 9 years. I'm currently the vice chair. I was also appointed by Governor Warner on the Asian Advisory Board, the Virginia Asian Advisory Board, where we came up with a report every year to the House of Delegates, to our legislators, and told them what the state of Asian American affairs were in terms of economy, education, whatever the issues were within our population. Because right now in Fairfax County, we are 21%, well, we are about 17-18% of the population, and in our district, we're about 21% of the population. And that's part of the service I've done over the years, is to make sure that people of color, minorities, including women, have a representation and a voice for the things that we need. The families that work hard every day, who put food on the table, we have to make sure that they are taken care of. Because as my wife, we have a 3.5-year-old son. My wife is always complaining to me because she has to spend a lot of time in traffic every day to be able, to go to work, and it's away from our son. And so that's, something, the quality of life is very important for those in the family and in the room who have families. That's a very important thing, is how much time we spend with our family. I appreciate the work that our colleagues have done in terms of making sure that we have transportation funding, but that doesn't solve the immediate congestion that we have right now. And also, one of the other areas that I focus on is about results, when we're talking about results, and that's what I'm going to focus on when I go down to Richmond. As a nonprofit leader, a few years ago, a couple of women were being sold on eBay. When we were talking about the trafficking, being sold on eBay for about $3,200. I was informed of it. I contacted my women at eBay, and within a day, that posting was taken off. So that's about results, and that's about getting things done. The other thing with state government, I was also appointed by Tim King to be on the Commission for National Community Service, which oversaw AmeriCorps. And as all programs are, there might be good programs, but if people don't know about it, there's no access to it. So I asked staff, does anybody in our community know about these programs? So you know what, I make sure that staff goes out and have regional meetings, so that way we explain what the programs are, so that way people can access it and get things done. And so it's about getting things done. And when I'm in the House of Legislature down in Virginia, it's only going to be about getting metrics and getting things done. So thank you very much for your time.
Good evening. Thanks for having us all tonight. Good to see many of you that come to town hall meetings I've held in this room and next door over the course of the last few years. I'm Jim LeMunyon. I'm completing my second term in the House of Delegates. My wife Robin and I have been 30-year residents of Northern Virginia, 22 up the road in Franklin Farm. Our 3 children are all out of the house now. We're empty nesters of about a month ago. They were all graduates of Oakland High School. We were an Oakland family for 8 years. I've been in business most of my adult life. Started a semiconductor materials company that was sold to Dow Corning, one of the largest semiconductor materials companies in the world, about 10 years ago. Helped another startup get off the ground since then. And then my day job right now is membership development, really marketing and sales for an Internet Trade Association in Washington, D.C. In the 2 terms that I've served in the House of Delegates, I've been fortunate to have 24 bills that I introduced, that I authored, not including other ones that I've co-sponsored, but 24 bills become law. Every one of them on a bipartisan basis through the House and Senate. It won't surprise many of you who follow what I've done that my focus is on transportation and education issues, and that's what most of those bills have to do with. 3 things I want to say about transportation, kind of where we've been, where we're going. When I was first elected in 2009, I said we need more money. We've got to be able to set priorities, because there'll never be an unlimited amount of money. The priority ought to be what's going to give us the biggest bang for the buck in terms of congestion reduction. And third is, how do we better synchronize land use and our transportation system? I think we from a policy standpoint, a legislative standpoint, we've made a lot of progress on 1 and 2. I carried a bill in 2012 that actually requires VDOT to set up a rating system and make that information public. That's in progress. Dave Marsden, who you may know in the Senate, carried the Senate version of that bill. The fact that VDOT is making a presentation about that bill tomorrow night before the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority and the implementation of it. Synchronizing, I think we still need to do better. I introduced a bill that became law that said that VDOT gets an opportunity to comment on every change to a comprehensive plan. These are the comprehensive land use plans in Northern Virginia, and to comment on the congestion reduction or the congestion impact, whether it creates more or creates less. Doesn't require local government officials to take that advice into account, but at least the information is available for them and the general public. In the brief amount of time I have, I won't go into detail on education other than to mention, because many folks don't know, that Fairfax County schools are getting a record amount of money from Richmond in the current two-year budget. The two-year budget that we have now has more than $1 billion for Fairfax County public schools. We tend not to micromanage that money. We don't earmark it for one thing or another. We have an elected school board. It's their responsibility to do that. We made a couple of exceptions for incentives for more science and math teachers, for school safety, and as Tom mentioned, we had the matching money for the teacher pay hike. I've been endorsed by the Virginia Education Association. In fact, out of 140 members in the House and Senate, 8 or 9 of us were designated as legislative champions. It was my privilege to receive that award earlier in the year. Third area I want to mention is good government and government reform. It's a bit of an all-encompassing idea, but the thing to mention is that we in Virginia have a balanced budget. We are not accumulating debt for future generations to pay. The folks about 25 miles across the river, and it's something that I vote for and would expect to continue to vote for. Then going forward, since I only have a limited amount of time, I just want to second the comments that have been made on ethics reform. I'm confident that that will be done in the 2014 session. Still details to be worked on exactly what kind of recording, what kind of things are acceptable or not. Oversight on transportation and education. We've done a lot of legislating in the last 4 years in both those areas. One of my frustrations with Congress is they keep passing bills year after year after year. And they stop to look back and say, well, it felt good when we passed that, but it really didn't really do any good. And I think we in Virginia got to be different. We've got to really look back and monitor the implementation of these legislative changes we've made both on transportation and education to make sure that we're getting results. And finally, on the idea of what else can we do for jobs and economy. As Tom mentioned, we did get that great rating from Forbes today. It's not by accident. We've really focused on that in a number of ways the last 4 years. I think the biggest untapped area of public policy for improving our climate for business is tax reform, both on the individual side and on the personal side. We had, as Dave mentioned, too many disincentives in the tax code that still continue to make businesses hesitate to move here or new companies to start and grow. So thank you for the opportunity to speak and look forward to answering your questions.
Open it up for questions. I'm not going to do like the sheriff. Everyone has to answer the same question. We're going to have you get a little bit more pointer and who you want to talk to, or who you want to comment on. Okay? Yes.
Yes, I have a question for the delegates. All of you have said, you know, how you pushed for the transportation bill down there, which is great. You said it would bring like $300 million a year plus the money that comes in from the state. So it's more money coming in from transportation. But I hope you all will focus on unclogging the roads in Fairfax County. I mean, this is what you've been pushing down there in Virginia in the delegation. I hope you'll really seriously work on unclogging the roads. One good example of that is Dulles Toll Road into Interstate 95 in the morning is a nightmare. It's only got one lane exit and back up wherever. That's an example of a tremendous clog. Please concentrate on clogging it. Second question I have is on education. You all mentioned education, but what's happened to the fact that kids today in class are not being taught regular handwriting, they're taught to print. I was shocked when I found out high school kids in my neighborhood tell me that they don't write anymore. They can't read handwriting. Whatever happened, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but whatever happened to handwriting? Thank you.
Who wants to handle any of those?
Yeah, maybe a couple of comments. The transportation bill has both a regional and a local component. 70% of the new money for Northern Virginia is designated for projects of regional significance that aren't required to, but might often cross different jurisdictions. The other 30% gets divided up for each jurisdiction, really to use as they want, as long as it's transportation. We didn't attach a lot of strings to that. So there is additional money for the localities, expended localities, in addition to the region. I think your question on handwriting really points to a more general question about who in government makes decisions. And I'm a believer that the federal government ought to stick to things that it can uniquely do well, the state the same that it can uniquely do well, and not try to do things that local governments and school boards can do. And I think on that one, it's really up to Fairfax County Public Schools and the school board to decide what they want to do or what not, rather than try to be micromanaged from it.
Anybody else want to comment?
Yes, yeah. I have a question. As you may be aware, the Fairfax County library system has had a crunch over the last 5 years, where funds have been eliminated. I've been told that the state has a library fund that is proportional to the population of each county, up until about 500 or 600,000 population. So in essence, Fairfax is twice that. The library supplement we get is basically 1/2 of what we should theoretically get based on our population. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I carry that. You're exactly right, Jeff. It's supposed to be so much per population, but they cut it off for the big counties like Fairfax. I carried a budget amendment 4 years ago to correct that. I was unsuccessful. I tried again, I think 2 years later, it was unsuccessful. We are aware of it, but you have to get it through the appropriations committee, and I've been unsuccessful in doing that, but I certainly am aware of it. And it is an example of where we're being treated differently than the rest of the state.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes.
I'd like to ask a kind of a structured question, and I hope it's a fair question. For those of you who are the incumbents, I think there's one Democrat, 3 Republicans. If you could identify 3 things that you wish you had gotten accomplished in the last 2 years, that you made an effort for, 3 things, and let your challenger then comment on that. Is that within the rules?
Yeah. Who wants to take that one?
Well, I'm going to answer in the positive. For those who've been here, and I look around the room, I see a lot of folks who've been here for the last, every time we come. I have concentrated on transportation. I was successful with others in transportation, which I think is absolutely critical to the future of the Commonwealth. I also have concentrated on education, and I mentioned in my hurried remarks TJ 21, which was a huge move forward in higher education, and it's been borne out that we're #1 in the nation in higher education. The one area that comes to mind that I have put bills in on, I mentioned the library bill, library budget amendment. I was not successful on that. I have put bills in to eliminate discrimination in employment. I've not been successful in that. I will continue working in that area. But all in all, I certainly have my share of bills that don't get passed. But I think the big picture, somebody mentioned you had 24 bills passed. I think I've had over 100 passed. I've been pretty darn successful. In the Washington Post a couple years ago called me one of the most effective legislators in the General Assembly.
Chime in with 3, and I doubt that the Tree School will disagree with them, but it kind of maybe gives people a sense of what we're dealing with down in the General Assembly. I guess the one that I've put in for probably the last 6 years dealt with the maintenance funding formula and how trees work in Virginia. And I'm pretty positive any of the incumbents who are on here have probably been a co-patron of that bill at one point or another. The way that our maintenance funding formula works is that there really isn't a maintenance funding formula. It is decided by the Commonwealth Transportation Board, which urban areas are vastly underrepresented. And the shame about all that is that VDOT every other year actually goes out and looks at the condition of our pavement and structures and bridges and culverts and comes up with how much you would need to pay for how you distribute the cost in order for everybody to have the same level of service. And unfortunately, that's not consistently used in terms of how to distribute that funding. That's why we put that in place, but the link hasn't been made. And so what I've tried to do for the last couple of years is put into law saying that as you are putting together the maintenance funding formula, you have to consider the tools that we think VDOT already have to put together. It's actually passed in one iteration in the House. And the reason it passed in the House is because in the House, we actually have an urban majority. In the Senate, it's a little bit more difficult because you have larger districts that are part rural and part urban, and you have some senators who have to make a decision about who they're going to make unhappy by how they vote. And so while we're able to get it narrowly passed through the House, it narrowly gets defeated over in the Senate, but that's something that I'm going to keep working on. Another issue, I don't know how many people here are members of homeowners associations as opposed to civic associations. I have the pleasure of sitting on the housing subcommittee and also the housing commission in the General Assembly, which oversees things like homeowners associations. The tricky part about homeowners associations is that they are private contracts. They're a private contract between the homeowner and the rest of the association. So it makes it very difficult for the General Assembly and inappropriate sometimes for the General Assembly to intervene in those contractual rights. What we've noticed, though, is that not all HOA declarations are created equal. Some of them are very good. Some of them are awful. A lot of them require that you have to have a supermajority to get anything changed, which hamstrings associations if they want to do anything. Because it's difficult to change in retrospect, I put in a bill that said we need to have more consistency going forward. And so the bill that I put in, I think we did have some co-patrons from my colleagues up here, was saying, hey, we need to come up with a gold standard for what these look like so that we're not creating new homeowners associations that aren't able to continue to do the jobs that they're supposed to do. And unfortunately, that was something that, while it passed the General Assembly, got vetoed by the governor. But probably in the next couple of years, I'd like to reintroduce that because it's a growing problem for anybody here who's part of an HOA, not one that's going to go away anytime soon.
I didn't answer that, John. I thought of two bills that I worked on and reminded me of both of them. You mentioned the Commonwealth Transportation Board. I tried last year to change the composition of the Commonwealth Transportation Board to get more suburban, urban members on it. I lost. It was 149 in the House. The other thing, and someone mentioned it, it may have been, I forgot who, talking about not getting their fair share for public schools. Probably every incumbent up here, including me, has tried to change what's called the local composite index, which is I call it the wealth factor. The richer the county or the city is, the more they pay for public education. I tried to change that. Probably everybody up here has worked on it in one form or another. 2 years ago, I tried to tie in with reducing the ID and DD waivers. We set a goal of reducing those to 0 over 10 years. I tried to do the same thing with the local composite index to raise the bottom up to 0.3 and the top down to 0.65, I think. I was not successful in that, and it's just a numbers game, to be honest with you. That's my theory.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jean Wood. I'm with Elizabeth and Elizabeth. I thank all of you because when I listen to all the presentations, I think each and every one of you are very well qualified, and I thank you for everything that you've done. I would like to ask all the incumbents and also the hopeful delegates that I attended a workshop yesterday regarding our coming Affordable Care Act and how it's to be implemented. And I learned something very shocking, that by the 1st of October, there comes a marketplace and we have to do exchange healthcare and all of that. Now, Virginia has the opportunity to receive the federal support of up to, I think, 2 billion, 2.5 million or so, but we did not receive it. We put it down because we didn't agree with the Medicare expansion. I'd like to know how that was being voted and debated at the General Assembly. I learned that in Virginia, Fairfax is the most, in a way, richest county, and North Virginia is considered have higher income level, but the level of poverty assigned to anyone who could get subsidized in healthcare is only about $5,500 a year. The salary to be classified as under poverty is $5,500 about. While compared to Alabama or Georgia, their level of poverty is classified $9,900, about $10,000. So we way below. So if there was a teenager, there was a young single woman, have 2 children, and unable to buy health insurance for herself and her children, where does she go if she doesn't get subsidized? And the question comes up to what I heard, that we have 19% Asian Americans in this area, especially in District 67. I know that you have 21% of Asian Americans, and we are small business. And we are, according to the statistic, I heard that 29% Korean Americans are small business and do not have insurance. And 26% Vietnamese Americans are small business and do not carry health insurance. So given the big pictures that we turned down the federal subsidy we turned down the Medicaid expansion, and therefore our state did not get the $2.5 billion from the federal funding, and now we do not have support. I met the executive director of the Northern Virginia Family and Healthcare.
Should you cut your colleague in there? Let them answer it.
Yeah, she told me that Virginia only had 2 navigators funded for, while Maryland has 300 navigators. And I was told that we have about 800,000 people needed help to find the right health insurance package because they don't have health insurance. So with the incumbent, would you explain why we did not pass that Medicaid expansion? And with the coming hopeful representative, would you tell me if by next year we expect to have that? Because if we grade it, business is our top concern for job, healthcare, and women, 50%. Would this be our top concern of our state?
I'll start. You know, our Attorney General, Ken Cuccinelli, led the charge to try to kill the Affordable Care Act after it was passed, and he's done everything that he could to try and sabotage it. Virginia chose not to enter its own exchange, but to make the federal government do it. That's why we only have the 2 choices. I'm a strong proponent of it. I will support it. I believe we should expand to 133% of the poverty line, and it will help 400,000 Virginians. We absolutely need it. It would be a huge mistake for us to pass this opportunity out.
I'll make a couple of comments. First of all, the decision, we did default to the federals on the health exchange, which I think was the proper decision. The governor made that, no one else made it, he had to make it. I think it was the proper decision because there were so many unknowns. What is going on now with the expansion, it's actually to 138%. The potential expansion for Medicaid is being looked at by the Medical Reform and Innovation Commission, which is made up of 5 members of the House and 5 members of the Senate. They're having public hearings on that right now, and they will make that decision. As a business, and basically what the governor has said and what others have said is we will expand if certain and sundry conditions, waivers are met. We have gotten one of those already. We've got the dual enrollment waiver given to us already, so that's a huge step forward. The budget, it's not a bill, by the way. Budget amendment was actually, I was the co-patron of the budget amendment that put the language in the budget for the study to go forward. That, as a business person, let me just give you 2 numbers to think about. Whether you agree with the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, which is commonly called Obamacare, which the president himself calls it that, so I think it's okay. We will be paying the taxes. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. The taxes that Virginians, you and I, business people, will pay over the next 10 years to the federal government is $29 billion. I'm going to say it again. We are going to pay that whether we expand or we do not expand. We're going to pay $29 billion. If we expand to the 138%, it's actually, they're predicting only about 69% of the 400,000 take advantage of it. We will receive back $26 billion. Yes, it's a $3 billion shortfall. Some of that is made up in the first couple of years. The first 3 years, the federal government pays 100%, then it drops down to 95, and then after, I think, by 5 years, it drops to 90%, and then it goes forward. The major reasons that I think people are very concerned about in the General Assembly, and I think it is valid, with the federal government having a $16 trillion deficit, growing about $1 trillion a year, will they be able to honor their commitment? So for that, we have an opt-out clause. When they do not honor their commitment, we opt out. That's the escape clause. The decision has not been reached yet. I would expect it will be made sometime in the November timeframe from what I am hearing. But I am not on the committee.
Yeah, maybe just to add on to, I think Tom gave a good overview of the status of how this process works in Virginia. Maybe just 2 comments to that. I don't think there's any disagreement about, it's not, it doesn't feel good to wake up in the morning and not have health insurance for your family. Okay? That's not something anybody should be happy about. One of the considerations that this commission, that Tom mentioned, is looking at is, are there ways to make the current program, even without expansion, more cost efficient? It is the fastest growing program in the budget. It's growing twice as fast as everything else. It competes with education, transportation, public safety. If we don't get that cost under control, with or without expansion, there will be a tax increase coming where we're going to make those other cuts, and that tax increase is going to make the transportation tax increase look small. Okay? And I can tell you from just one anecdote. There's a woman, I won't mention her by name, some of you may know her, who lives in the district, and she uses her home to take care of disabled people, and she's paid by Medicaid. And I've been to visit her on more than one occasion to know the folks that she cares for. She will tell you more articulately and more emphatically than anyone else that the Medicaid program is broken, and it needs to be reformed, and it needs to be fixed. And she can go on and on and on about how she can't do the right thing for the people she's serving because of some crazy rules. We can only reform that program, I'm sorry to say, with permission from Washington. It shouldn't be that way. Washington ought to just write us a check and say, Virginia, we're going to trust your government, your legislature, your local people to do the right thing and take care of people in need. And until we get that reform, I think that's going to delay the action on the part of this commission. It's just my guess.
The question is on the Medicaid expansion. It has nothing to do with the federal. I mean, we need that works for the federal. It's just simple Medicaid expansion. Why we opt out of it? Why we not caring for our own people when we do have the needs?
Well, I think for the reasons we described, you can expand Medicaid, but if there's still the state component.
But $2.5 billion coming to our people here. It comes to the revenue here for the people of Northern Virginia and Virginia as well.
And I guess the point I would make, and similar to my other comment about legislation and public policy generally, we've got to not only do something that we think is the right thing, we need to actually do what's going to help people in need. And that program really needs to be reformed. You take that money from Washington, and it may not help the people in need.
My question is just for the work that have already been done here, very small and focused. I'm not talking about reforming Medicare and Medicare, because that has to do with the federal government. And it's a different story. And I can discuss with you about the national deficit clearly, and I can give you a number, but that's not the point. The point is why we did not receive agree to the Medicaid expansion to have our own people in your district and in North Virginia and in Virginia.
Okay, let me get some more comments from the panel up here.
Thank you. You've been mixing up Medicare and Medicaid from what my ears are hearing. Medicare is totally funded by the federal government for the elderly and for disabled people. okay? Medicaid is for the poorest of the poor. In Virginia, 50% is paid for by Virginia and the taxpayers, and 50% comes from the government, okay? So as a physical therapist, looking at Medicaid, as a provider, Medicaid, if I treat someone, I maybe will get, if it's out of pocket, $150. Medicaid, about a decade ago, I would get $17 for the same treatment. So there are many, many providers in Virginia that will not take Medicaid. Okay? So that's one issue. If you're looking at the reform, we can do nothing. We can expand it, or we can look at reforming Medicaid. So I believe that is what's being looked at, is how can we reform the broken system now without pouring more money into it. If you look at it looks really good the first 5 years, because the federal government said, we're going to pay for it. But I would concur, is the government going to be able to pay year 3 and 4? Year 5 and year 6 and 7, the formula changes a little bit, puts the onus more on the state. We will lose a lot of money year 6 and 7. A lot of billions that Virginia taxpayers are going to have to be responsible for. So it looks good on the front side, but as we go along, the onus to the taxpayers will get more. Now, the sick, the very sick, if they're spending $5, the rest of us are helping to pay. We put in $1 to help pay for the Medicaid we pay for. As things change, as Obamacare comes in, we will be responsible. It'll be a $3 to $1. So people who are healthy are going to be, you're going to be paying more than those that need health care. On a business end, if the businesses do not provide insurance for their employees, they get fined. So what you're seeing is that businesses are only going to hire people for 29 hours, because then they're not responsible for the health insurance. So there are going to be more of the working poor without insurance. The number on Medicaid are going to rise. Somebody's got to pay for it.
A couple things for the record. One is I'm in favor of the Medicaid expansion for the 400,000 or whatever the number turns out to be, because I know too many times people have no health care, no medical coverage, wait until they're really sick. Sometimes it's too late, and they go to the emergency room where they have to be served, and all the medical stuff in the world doesn't make them whole, doesn't cure them many times. It will create 30,000 new jobs in the medical field, which is significant for our economy and our region, certainly. And overall, the hospital costs may be more controllable already across the country. That has happened. So I think it'll benefit in multiple ways. And for the other thing on the record is, my wife and I have paid into Medicare with our Social Security all the time. We've been receiving salaries. She's still getting a small salary. And now we're still paying for Medicare out of our Social Security. So it's not an entitlement. It's something we're still paying for. We paid for it ahead of time. We're getting it now, and we're paying for part of it. Not to speak of copay for everything we do. So just let you know that.
Yeah, there are a couple things. I think Jim hit on it a little bit, and Tom. What the president's done, there's no doubt there need to be changes to the healthcare system, no doubt. But the fact of the matter is, what the president's done with the Affordable Health Care Act, he's turned the boat on its side. I'm a fan of incremental change. And what we've done is turn the boat on its side. When you turn the boat on its side, what happens? The dishes fall off. And if you look at it, there's a lot of problems here. Patrice talked about people now going to 29 hours a week, a lot of employees. It's introduced instability into the market. We're looking at, they said about the budget. Understand distinctly what he's saying. It'll pay 100% for the first couple of years. After that, we've got to pick up a few $100 million a year. So
We have to either have $200 or $300 million tax rate, or we have to cut services $200 or $300 million in some other area. These are real decisions that we've got to take slowly and slowly. I think these are things that are important. It is you look today, there's an article in the paper, in Virginia, some of the, for young folks, you can find a kind of a bronze, they call it, healthcare plan, $44 some a month. Once the Affordable Care Act goes in, that on the exchange, the lowest for that age group will be $144 a month. When more people are going door to door, let me finish my sentence. When people are going door to door, we're hearing families say more and more, my premiums are being jacked up. What is going on? I was at Boy Scouts the other night, and one of the leaders came in and said, I just got a letter from my doctor. He's been my doctor for 20 years. And he's going concierge. He's kicking me off because of the Affordable Care Act. And my wife got it 2 weeks ago. And I went and saw my best friend that weekend. He got the same thing. Now, I told you earlier, I do a lot of work with the IRS, kind of public-private partnership. I've got a guy there. He's a friend of mine. He's a liberal Democrat. We can't agree on the time of day. But he's a heck of a good guy. Heck of a good guy. And he was been in charge until the last 6 months of trying to implement the IRS regulations as it pertains to the Affordable Health Care Act. I said, David, tell me how this is going. You know, Republicans are saying it's going to be, the IRS is going to hire 18,000 new employees. It's like, oh no, that's Republican mess. It's only 12,000 new employees. 12,000 new IRS workers, there we go. I said, David, how is it? He said, Tim, it's a mess. He said, I voted for President Obama. I'm a fan of President Obama. I think highly of him, and this is a mess. Understand what I think a lot of us up here are saying. There are things we could have done. There are things we need to do on the healthcare system. But turning the boat on its side all at once, the dishes are falling off. And you're seeing it day after day. The president had to delay the mandate for businesses. Why? Because it wasn't working. Businesses are screaming. The unions, some of the biggest supporters of this bill nationally, SEIU, and labor, they are all up in arms because the Affordable Care Act is going to hurt labor and union employees. Take it slowly is all we're saying. Think it through. Do not turn the boat on its side.
So far, I'm kind of confused. From the previous conversations with some of the delegates at another forum, I heard that with the House of Legislature decided not to proceed with implementing this change. Tonight, I heard that it's the governor who made that decision. So I'm kind of confused as to who originally is making decisions on behalf of healthcare issues here at the Commonwealth. While we're kind of debating the final points of the solution, we're basically not doing anything. The point is in Loudoun County, there's about 20,000 people who would be impacted if Medicaid was expanded. There's about 20 to 40,000 folks in Fairfax County who would be impacted if Medicaid expansion occurred. And the folks who would qualify for Medicaid, for the most part, are young children. And so what we're talking about is preventive medicine with young children. If we don't take care of the force of our community right now, we can talk about education, we can talk about all these future workforce, we're basically not taking care of the folks right now. And at some point, we can talk about the private points of who's paying for it. At some point, we are going to be paying for it when they get sick, because I am unaware of any hospital that turns children away or sick people away. And so we have to start addressing that. At some point, we're going to have to talk about this. So we can keep saying, if there's a solution, so far I'm hearing a lot of complaints, but I haven't heard from our elected officials what the solutions are. And so I really, hope that we would think about this seriously in terms of just sitting here and going back and forth, or actually making a decision, implementing something, and if it doesn't work, that's why we're elected, to modify the program and make sure it gets improved over time.
And Hung makes a good point, but what he's going to have to figure, if he ever gets elected, is which program he wants to cut and which taxes he wants to raise if we implement it. Because it's hundreds of millions.
And those are the hard decisions that leaders make.
Those are decisions you're going to, that Jim Money will make next year.
I was going down to Ken.
I just wanted to follow up. Other states have been successful at expanding Medicaid programs. Vermont I know back in 2003, had 97% of their children covered. I know that Massachusetts has been very successful. This isn't an impossible solution. We can do this. Another thing that I want to ask about, because I'm a little bit confused, Patrice mentioned that businesses would no longer allow people to work more than 29 hours, you said, something like that.
Yeah.
And I just want to make a point, because the General Assembly actually voted on a bill that would restrict hours of work for government employees who were not already qualified for health care under the Affordable Care Act. It was this past year, the Governor's Amendment number 50 to HB 1500 in the budget, and it restricts state employees' hours. And I know that Tom voted for it. I don't know who else did, but
I did vote for it because it applied only to part-time employees and basically university faculty who are adjunct professors. So you really need to read the bill.
no, it said, no, I didn't say that. I said already, not already. So it was limited so they wouldn't be able to say.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm Delegate Tim Long. I represent the 36 districts. I have a difficult run precinct. Two all here for difficult run precinct. All right, good. I know to be on these cameras here, I'd have come much earlier. Seriously. I appreciate the fact that we're on Medicaid expansion. It's really a critical issue. And there's been a lot of nice talk about the technical arrangements related to Medicare expansion and all that. Now let's cut through all that and say, why didn't Virginia expand Medicaid? Folks, when you get to the bottom line, we had a governor who was going to be a vice presidential nominee or maybe a future presidential nominee, and it wasn't a popular thing to do to endorse something that became known as Obamacare. That's not a popular thing to do. And so the same reason that the Congress has voted 40-some times to defund Obamacare is the same reason Virginia didn't at that point in time go forward. It's a heck of a deal for us. Now what's going to happen in 6 or 8 years? We're going to be back here discussing budgets and so on, and we're going to have to make decisions at that point in time. But the decision point today is clear to me. There are 1 million Virginians uninsured. We can insure 400,000 of them with this move. The funding is in place for 3 of those years. We need to move forward. It's a technical issue on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's an issue related to human morality. It's a moral thing to do. I find with great interest a number of Republican governors now that are getting on board. They're making this thing happen. Is it going to knock the dishes off the shelf? It is a major change in the way we've been doing business, but it is a change that has been a long time coming and one we need to go forward on. I think you need to elect people to the legislature who are willing to take on causes like this and say, we're going to find solutions to this for people who are uninsured, they ought to be insured, and we're going to find a way to do that. And we can, in fact, do it.
Do we have any other?
Right here.
Okay. So.
Good evening, Al Francis, Little Rocky Run. Just to switch the conversation back to transportation. I-66 is an extremely congested central commuter corridor. It's broken. You can see it very clearly peak time, morning and evening. Does anybody have any specific ideas as to how to reduce the level of congestion, the number of cars on I-66? There is additional money now available. What kinds of projects would work?
More than happy to jump in, and other people can weigh in as well. You know, I'm excited that we're actually engaging in something called a request for ideas with the business community, where they're coming in and expressing what they think can be done to reduce congestion along the I-66 corridor. And I guess why I'm excited about that is that now we actually have some money to maybe implement some of those really good ideas. But the simple fact is I-66 is a mess, and you know, nothing we do is going to make it so that you can get from one end of my district to the other going 60 miles per hour. The things that we need to do, though, I think are threefold. First of all, We need to, I think, better enhance our mass transit opportunities, especially going out to Centerville, going out to Gainesville. Expanding Metro, that's a long way off. That takes a long time and it's expensive. But what is in our reach, what has been discussed, is bus rapid transit. We do have room for something that can look and feel like it's part of Metro, that integrates with Metro, but it's going to be a lot less expensive, and I think it can be very, very effective and efficient. The other thing we need to do, we need to get rid of some of those bottlenecks. I-66 and 28 in particular is a place that we absolutely need to invest some infrastructure money to get that untangled. And then last but not least, something that we've been working on, I know VDOT's been working on it in an experimental stage. We need to use technology better to make sure that we're enhancing our existing capacity. We were way behind the times in terms of being able to use technology to better signalize our lights in real time, to better alert people if there's traffic problems so they can use additional means of getting to work. And I think that's going to be a sound investment going forward. So I think we've got a lot of options on the table. And again, that's the reason why I voted for that bipartisan transportation plan, because I want to make sure that those ideas can actually be implemented in action.
A couple things. Over the last few years, we've implemented a number of telework initiatives to make it easier and to encourage people to telework. I think that's one thing, taking people off the road, which I think is incredibly important. Dave mentioned the 2866 project, which is our top priority project in the Northern Virginia corridor. I mean, that thing backs up because we don't have the ramp there. What we need to do, that road backs up and it impacts congestion from Fauquier to Arlington, all the way through, because it backs up both ways. And I think, Jim has worked on a number of things to make sure we focus on congestion mitigation, because the monies go, when they're spent, they don't go to $1 million bus stops, they don't go, which are shelters, they go to congestion mitigation projects to move people. With that being said, in acknowledging we need the money on 28 and 66, one of the things, and it's a little west of here, I also represent part of Pennsylvania, Gainesville, and Haymarket. I've been debating respectfully with the governor and the secretary of transportation on this north-south corridor, which will go through the rural crescent of western Pennsylvania. One of the things about it, it's $1 billion project. So you've got money, I think, for a new road that should go to projects like this 28 and 66 project. The other thing for all of you that live here in Virginia and western Fairfax to think about, when they talk about building this north-south corridor, what they're also going to do is close 29 and 234 through the battlefield. And when we asked them, I asked the Secretary of Staff, Deputy Secretary, I said, well, 29 runs parallel to 66. What happens when you traffic calm close 29? What happens to those 25,000 trips a day? He said, well, we'll just put them on 66. So if you don't think 66 is congested enough now, wait till they build the north-south corridor, that road I'm fighting, and they have another 25,000 cars a day. It'll be a traffic nightmare from Fauquier to Arlington. As I said, I joke around and say that's the third battle of Manassas we're fighting right now. But I mean, there's a lot of opportunities here working together, like I said. So, but I think for all of our districts, a lot of our districts, this 2866, we've got to be focusing on that. That's the bottleneck from which everything else ripples out.
Okay. For the record, Delegate Hugo voted against the bipartisan transportation funding bill, the biggest opportunity we had to increase funding for improving transportation in Northern Virginia. He can tell you why, but he voted against it. It's on the record, voting against the members of his own party. I'm glad it got passed. I'm tending to be in favor of something like the Bi-County Parkway. The route is not decided, it's not designed. The environmental impact statement study is not finished yet, so we don't know the details. It needs to be sensitive to the community needs and to the homeowners, and yet it can provide a relief for 66 and where I live, which traffic clogs Stone Road and even Pleasant Valley, Virginia Run area. So I'd like to see some more thinking about that. US 15 is an embarrassment for a US highway, a 2-lane country road from 234 to Leesburg, and then from Leesburg to Point of Rocks. We already have the right of way there. I don't know why funding hasn't been provided to simply put at least shoulders, even bike lanes. It could be made a safer highway. There's accidents there almost every day in some part of US 15. So while we're waiting for the proposal to be finalized for the parkway, Route 15 could be increased, improved, so traffic could flow and relieve even 66, I think. So different things we need to look at. And one other thing on Metro, last 2 times I would try to use Metro to go to Washington, D.C. I couldn't find room in the garage, and one time it cost me $4 to get out. A little bit of technology could go a long way to let people have at least 15 minutes to explore the parking. And it wouldn't be very difficult with all the upgrading necessary for Metro to put a little more power on the line so you could have longer trains and you could handle more people. So there's options, and more than I know, I'm sure, that could be explored and done.
Yeah, on just a little more detail on I-66. There's 10 options that are under review right now in a formal way. Because it's an interstate highway, you can't make changes without cooperation of the federal government. So there's a joint review that's going on right now, and there's more information on it on the VDOT website if you want to look that up. I actually listed them all in a mailer that I sent to constituents last week, so if you live in the 67th district, you might have seen that. If you don't, I'm happy to give you a copy.
Yeah, take it back to me.
So, okay. In addition to the comment that Dave made on bus rapid transit, there is the rail, which is a longer term thing, additional lanes, one that a lot of folks don't consider in this context, but I think really deserves consideration, is the extension of the Virginia Railway Express out to Manassas and Haymarket. Because there's traffic that comes from that far, if we can get them on the train and off the road, it's just going to make things better all the way in. Those are things under formal study. There's an 11th thing that's actually underway. A contract's been issued. You're going to start seeing changes out on 66 early in 14, and that's something called active traffic management. So you're going to see new signs, new overhead configurations where there will be sensors monitoring the speed of traffic on the road, and the shoulder lanes will open anytime they're needed to keep traffic moving. We're going to get rid of fixed hours. We're going to get rid of Monday through Friday. And so it's called active traffic management. It's funded. It's $34 million, and it's going to go from Gainesville to the Potomac River. So hopefully that will be something, particularly on the weekends and some of the strange hours that we can see. That'll start. That should be up and running next year. It's going to be that quick. It doesn't require any lanes, big construction. It's just electronics and overhead configuration. Already an idea that's working in other states, Interstate 5, out in the Portland, Oregon area, and others. So it's a good idea that we're adopting here.
I have a question. I've joined the Citizens Advisory Committee of the Transportation Planning Board, and we talk about both mass transit improvements and roadway improvements, the two of them. And when we have mass transit improvements, they're usually through WMATA, and WMATA is an interstate, intergovernmental agency, and they make decisions. But there is no one planning group for the highways in our tri-jurisdictional area. Maryland, Virginia, and the district are sole within their areas. And there are other states that have adjoining borders. I think, for example, New York, New Jersey, and the Port Authority of Trans-Hudson. So they could work state to state and come up with solutions that the state sent representatives to, but that might make the decision. And as long as we have Virginia and Maryland who can't see eye to eye on the additional Potomac crossings, why don't we consider creating an interstate group and give that group the power to make that determination that neither state could come up with, and have them come up with the best solution? When Congressman Wolf, when I asked him about that, he told me, well, I don't want to offend some of my people who, the counties of Fairfax County Sully didn't want it, so I didn't pursue it. But what we need is a planning authority that has the authority to come up with the best routes, because nobody wants to take that responsibility on their own. What about having Virginia propose that?
Jeff, I would say there is a body that can recommend that kind of thing. They have to decision on it. But unfortunately, it doesn't have the power to enforce that. And that's really what you're talking about. I will give Secretary Knott credit. About a year ago, he put together a group called the Supernova Group. which I happen to be on. I'm on the executive team. What we're trying to do is put together, and it's basically all transit. It's not roads, it's transit. Put together a group that will recommend how to improve transit in Virginia, West Virginia, and Maryland. But I will tell you, which everybody in the room knows, we can recommend it all day long, but if Maryland says no or West Virginia says no, so be it. But hopefully we'll have enough rationale behind it and enough thought behind it that it'll get serious consideration.
And I agree with you, that's transit. We need somebody with that same oomph for roadway planning as well as transit. And the states have to come up with the agreement that an impartial third body is the body to make the decision. And right now, nobody's the big person in the room. We're all squibbling symbols.
Well, Jeff, if you're reelected, you'll be chairman of the Transportation Committee, I believe, once you're in line.
Yes.
Somebody will vote in the room.
I'm do Ken and then General back here. Ken. And that order right now.
Yeah, let me give you a parallel, because all this talk about these planning groups and people working together and all that good stuff, people are paying a high price now being stuck in the traffic on 66. We talk about not wanting to tax people. I suggest to you that's the kind of taxation. When you spend an hour or two stuck in the traffic and you can't get home, you can't get to work on time and so on. That's a tax that we never get to vote on when we let people sit in traffic. It's astonishing to me that people in this delegation would go to Richmond after a couple decades and finally get a package worked out, all of which we found some reason to not like some of the pieces of it, and then vote against it. Because it's critical to us that we have some money for our infrastructure. Now, we will continue to have debates about what those projects will be, but for members of our own delegation to abandon our efforts to try to get some money for this region, I just find it unconscionable. Now, let me give you another parallel. 18 years ago, we started the Dulles Corridor Rail Association. It was a group of businesses, citizens, and so on, working with the goal of bringing mass transit to western Fairfax County, because we recognized you'd never be able to build roads wide enough and move all the cars, and we'd have to go to mass transit. And a lot of people said then, oh, gee, that'll never happen. It's just too far off. It'll take so much time. In January, I went to Reston to Wheelie Avenue and joined me on the metro train, and you could go all the way to Largo, Maryland without getting out of your seat. It can happen when you have people of goodwill working together. In about 2018, that'll be in Loudoun County. So that corridor will be moving forward. Short-term, what David Boulevard was talking about in terms of bus mass transit, I think has great potential. But beyond that, we need to start now to recognize that mass transit needs to occur in the future. It occurs when you have people who are willing to vote for measures funded, and two, when have people willing to work together on it.
Yes. Thank you, sir. This question is for anyone, but maybe for the comments at first. It's on education, so 2 questions. Trying to find out the rationale. Delegate Rust had mentioned about the LCI, the composite index, and how that's going to affect FCPS, Fairfax County schools. They projected on Monday $21 million deficit there out of $106 million. So obviously that's a big concern of obviously that index. Now, with just passed recently with the A through F grading school system, I can see maybe some positive, but one of the aspects that's going to come out of this is going to battle communities. If one high school, let's say in Sully, is graded B, and others graded A, and you have someone who's coming into this area, businesses coming in, then you might have to say they haven't had nots. This person X has the potential of living in this area, the person Y does not and has to live in another part within the same district. So that's one question I have is the rationale. Second is in terms of in the whole economics, geographically, money going to where in the county. The next one is the whole, I think, Delegate money. You had mentioned about school boards having their own sovereignty or their own autonomy, I guess, in one of your answers. I think that's what I heard. If I misrepresented, you can better explain it. But one of your answers to your questions earlier. But let's say what passed recently, let's say a school system is failing. The state can come in now as a school board, I don't know what you call it, a state school board. They can come in and say, we're going to take power now. And that, I'm a little hesitant on that in terms of as a voting citizen, that my vote didn't count on the local end. For the elected officials, how many there are in the area. And then I'm trying to answer the whole question of your better feel the economics coming down education. cost per pupil is about $100 more in the last 6 years. As you know, our economy has suffered. The school system is 185,000 students this year, but bursting at the seams. Westfield, you see it. Lake Braddock is 4,000 down the road. And then also teacher salary, $10,000 less compared to Montgomery County. So where do you think we're losing also teachers? Is obviously across the bridge.
Let me attempt to, since you mentioned my LCI comment, and Ken was probably there, so Ken, correct me if I'm wrong. There was a Supreme Court case back 25 years ago, that basically said you had to provide an equal opportunity education throughout the Commonwealth. What that meant was that the richer areas, of which Fairfax Valley certainly are, will have to supplement the poorer parts of Virginia. We are doing that. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. I would argue, though, that every kid in Virginia, whether they live in Fairfax County or they live in Bedford, Virginia, ought to have the same basic opportunity in education. So, yes, we're supplementing it. And other than that, that's the biggest area of the budget work. Everybody talks about all this money flowing from up here to Richmond. That's the single biggest area right there. In all candor, I think if we don't raise the educational level of these kids throughout the rest of the state, we're going to continue to struggle. So that's the LCI.
If I could jump in with the LCI, I think there's a couple issues at stake, and just like Tom said, I don't mind paying a little bit more to make sure that folks in Bristol or Lunenburg or other poorer parts of the Commonwealth get a good education. I think in the long term that helps us all out. What I do want to make sure, though, is that the measure is fair. Because there's one thing to do our fair share and another to be taken advantage of. And the LCI, as it's currently written, is not a true measure of your revenue generating capacity. And so, for instance, one thing that's not included in the LCI are your ability to raise funds through hotel and motel taxes. That's great for places like Hampton Roads because that's not reflected in their ability to pay. It hurts other parts of the state. So there are some things in that LCI that really need to be fixed, and that needs to start to be more of a priority. Northern Virginia, we've been trying to do that for years, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to finally get some changes done. The other area that I think people need to be very concerned about for education funding is losing our cost to compete funding. And this is something where the governor put in an amendment, or I guess the budget, that took away cost to compete for support personnel for education. The simple fact is that it is 33% more expensive to live in Northern Virginia than any other part of the state, and 66% more expensive than the polar opposite. And so that's why that cost of living is included in the budget. It's because the money that we get from Richmond, not only are we not getting as much out of the LCI, but the purchasing power is much weaker. And so that's something that as a delegation we've worked on very hard, is to make sure that we keep that cost to compete and try to make sure people understand why it's there. But that's something, unfortunately, the rest of Virginia is going to keep whittling away at. It didn't help to have a governor that was putting in amendments to do that. Fortunately, I think we're able to at least stop it for the time being.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the many areas I think where we work together on that. The cost to compete. I think last year, Bob McDonald, Governor McDonald, were Republican. It was going to take out the cost to compete, and I think we came together as a delegation, with the Virginia delegation, and said that. A few years before that, Governor Kane, Democrat, was going to change some of the LCI, some of the money, and the delegation, the Republican and Democratic delegation in Northern Virginia, basically exploded and came together and said, we are not going to put up with that, and we fixed it. And I think that's one area we work together. I think it's an interesting proposition. When I first got on Capitol, somebody said, "What's different?" or "What surprised you not being elected?" And having worked in Congress, the rhythms are somewhat similar, some of the terminology. What surprised me the most is how much the rest of the state disliked Northern Virginia, but hated Fairfax County. I mean, it's sad, but there really was a kind of a jealousy about Fairfax County. And I think a number of us, on a bipartisan level, have worked together to try to reach out downstate with our folks, Democrats and Republicans, to make them understand. Because I think Ken has indicated it, and Tom, we generate the lion's share of the tax revenue for the Commonwealth. And so what we have said to our colleagues, downstate Democrat and Republicans, hey, be careful, you don't kill the golden goose. You know, and so we will work with that. So I think on cost to compete in the LCI, I think that's again one area I think we all try to work together on to go there.
Hi, Ted Trushanicki. I'm a resident of Western Fairfax. The first thing I have to say, just to dovetail off of Delegate Hugo's comments, I've sat in meetings like this for the past 10 years, and each time your constituents have demanded that you go down to Richmond and produce the results that we need in Northern Virginia. It's been a slog, and for those of you that have been doing it for 6 to 10 years, you know it. And I have to say that I see the results. I see some positive things coming back from Richmond that you guys have worked hard to produce. Certainly the transportation activity that's gone on, I think is a big plus, the recognition that we need those funds, and thank you for that. Now, to the challengers, take some of that lesson with you if you're fortunate to go to Richmond and follow through on some of that, because I have to say we've been screaming for help, and you guys went down there and you got a lot of things done, work to be done still, but very good things. Now, on the issue of transportation, I know we've been talking about macro level issues, and I hate to bring up a micro level issue, but we live with day-to-day micro level issues that are irritants to us, minimal, and then broader than that. And right now I'm fighting a battle opposing a project in Western Fairfax, which is Fairfax's rural crescent, by the way. It's our last bastion of open space where the county has invested heavily to protect it by setting up areas of open space. But there's a project to put a roundabout in an area where it's very inappropriate. That roundabout, it's been stated by a number of public officials in Loudon and in Fairfax County that roundabout at Pleasant Valley and Braddock Road will benefit Loudon County residents. The vast majority of this will benefit them. And it'll be a negative impact on Western Fairfax residents. And, Delegate Lundy, I have to ask you, 91% of your constituents are Fairfax County constituents. 90% are Loudon County constituents. How could you support a project like that?
Well, they're all my constituents. I think it's an example of a project that is an example of a comment I made earlier, which is we need to evaluate these projects based on congestion relief and be very objective. Clearly, the issue, the specific issue for the folks on the Loudoun County side is that they will sit in Braddock Road, kind of four-way stop, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, for 15, 20, sometimes a half hour to get to a four-way stop and a backup that's more than a mile long. I don't think anybody in this room should say that that's a good thing. The question is, what do we do about it? There's a public hearing that the VDOT has set up to look at a specific plan. And to their credit, they said, okay, we've got to do something. Here's what we think the solution is. Now, if that's not the right solution, then let's come together and find something better. If it's a traffic light or some other way to address that issue, I think we ought to find a win-win, not a win-lose. But whatever the analysis is, it really needs to be based on data. So you've indicated that allowing people to go through a circle rather than a four-way stop would seem to suggest that traffic would move more rapidly through that intersection, and therefore maybe accumulate somewhere else on Pleasant Valley or Braddock Road. And that may happen, or it may not. We really need to look at that with VDOT's expertise to say what other problem could be caused, and is there a way to mitigate that?
Just as a follow-on comment, we are spending $100 million of taxpayer money on the widening of Route 50 from 4 lanes to 6 lanes. The reason for it is to facilitate Loudoun County traffic to get to work centers in Fairfax and beyond. My position, and it's been clearly stated, is to support a do-nothing option with Braddock Road and Pleasant Valley Road until we see what $100 million will buy us in the form of traffic congestion relief.
Yeah, let me just respond on that. The rating system that VDOT's established, and this is not one that's particularly complex compared to some other transportation projects. So the question is, does the solution on 50 solve the problem at that intersection? And I think we should be able to know that using the transportation modeling capabilities we have, which fairly accurate, not an exact science, but it's good enough to really confirm whether that presumption is true or not. That's all. And then proceed based on the facts.
If I may make a comment, I'm opposed to the roundabout simply because, let's see, as you say, let's see what the $100 million project on Route 50 is going to do first. Because right now, that's a choke point. If we start construction on this, we have 2 choke points, and realistically, Loudoun County are not going to have anywhere to go because they're going to be even more stuck in traffic. And there may be great folks working at VDOT, but I don't necessarily trust VDOT because right now on Stringfellow, as another example, there's a construction site going on, a project going on there, and on Poplar Tree, VDOT decided to change the light signals a little bit. In their wisdom, that the flow of traffic is going to be going better. Well, now traffic is going back to Greenbrier West Elementary School is lined up. And so a lot of folks in that community said, hey, VDOT, could you at least change the signal? You know, because these are the folks who actually live there. VDOT does not live there. These are the residents who live there in that neighborhood. And they called VDOT. It's been over a year because I thought they were knocking. And they said, you know, could you just switch the signals to kind of go both ways? And came up with some ideas. VDOT said, no, we're not going to do it because it's going to be done in 3-hour increments. And my thought is, well, why don't you just do it for a week or two and really implement it, test it out, see if it works or not. If it doesn't, then go back and change it the way it does. How much does it cost for somebody to go on the computer, ding, 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 you know, maybe a couple of minutes at most? And so at least let's try it out and test it out versus in their wisdom saying, no, we're not going to do it. So we have to be more efficient with our resources. And really, there is a lot of congestion here. And again, I live right there on Route 50 in Stringfellow. So either direction I go, I'm stuck. And so I appreciate the resources that we have, but as good stewards, and we've got to make sure that the programs that we have finish on time. And if I may say this, I grew up in Los Angeles. I was there in 1994 when the 10 freeway fell down, one of the biggest highways on the interstate. That thing was fixed very quickly. We're talking about a large population base there in Los Angeles. That impacts a lot of people. That baby got done very, very quickly. It was within a year time frame or so it got done. So why can't we, on Route 50, for example, get things done faster, or any of these other construction sites, get them done faster? That way people are not sitting, the Democrat, Republicans, purple, blue, whatever, we're all sitting now. So why not get it done a lot quicker? And I appreciate that. And you know, we do have to look at some studies, but we have to make sure though, we can get the construction site done much, much faster.
Yeah, that project's in my district. To be direct, I'm adamantly opposed to that roundabout. Let me say, to Jim's point, this is where I think we have to listen to Lisa about the data. I oppose this project. When I met with VDOT a year ago, they said to us, we're not going to move this thing quickly. Let's see what happens on Route 50. That's exactly what they told us, face to face to us. Now, when VDOT met last week, when I watched it on the computer, when they met with Loudoun County, the head of VDOT in the area said, oh, this project is now expedited. Well, it wasn't expedited. It was supposed to wait until we heard what happened on Route 50. We need to wait for the data on Route 50 to see what happens. Then we can look at it. I'll still think it's a wrong project, wrong time, wrong project. I'll be opposed. But at least you'll feel better when you know exactly what's happening on 50. Because I think once 50 is completed, I don't think the traffic validation will warrant. The traffic warrants will hold up and support that traffic.
Okay, I just want on the record, I represent Sully Station 2, and we have neighborhoods that go right onto Braddock Road. And the problem with that roundabout is there'll be no breaking traffic from Loudoun County from South Riding. You're just going to be streaming forever. And anybody that goes at an intersection in the rush hour knows how horrible it is. It's a little country road. It used to be a gravel road, as most of us know. Now it's a major thoroughfare. So for all those little side streets, people can hardly get in and out of their neighborhoods. So if you make it roundabout, it'll be worse. There are environmental issues. There's also the problem with the roundabouts in Loudoun County that exists now. The increase in traffic accidents has gone way up since roundabouts have been put in. It could be because of more traffic. We need to learn about roundabouts. But I just want it on the record. We are strongly against that roundabout. Thank you.
I mentioned it earlier, but just to make a point, there is the VDOT meeting on October 9th. So if you're aware of that, if you're interested in that, whether you're for or against it, it's a good place to go and let the views be heard, and frankly, learn more about it.
Stone Middle School, 6 to 8 p.m.
Supervisors throughout the county told supervisors throughout the county involved in this told all the constituents to show up to those meetings so they can voice the sound of their We want Fairfax County to solve their problems. They just manage to build themselves right in the public institution. They need to fix the people in Fairfax County can represent the government. Yes, sir.
If you'll allow one more, I know it's pretty late in the evening, I'll try to make it interesting. Before we got here, so I tried to elicit some perspectives from Richmond first, our electeds, our incumbents. There was an interesting report that came out 2 months ago that Fairfax County, we're talking about the NB factor station on the west side, is among the healthiest counties in the nation. And I guess the men have the longest, greatest longevity, and women are about the best in the entire nation. So in Fairfax County, I think we all live in Fairfax County. I've lived here 35, 36 years. I'm from Ohio originally. We're awfully darn fit. And I'd like to hear from Richmond, the sitting members of the House of Delegates, and your thoughts about Fairfax as a model. What are we doing right? What, if anything, can state government do more by way of declaratory policy than allocating funds or describing programs, maybe an advisory committee? So you're 100 members of the House of Delegates, you're 40, not here, but 40 members of the Senate. We have 3 statewide office holders. And here in Fairfax, we've set an example. So I'd like to hear from the elected officials. Now we have, I think, 2 Democrats and 3 Republicans sitting here. And then the challengers, if they have any comments. What can you do from Richmond? Maybe maybe it's setting an example. Maybe everybody goes out and walks 3 to 5 out of 7 days a week. I don't know. And it's not a mandated policy. It's a declaratory policy. I happened to see Eric Cantor being interviewed on, 60 Minutes. He was driving a bike with his wife, and I thought that's a good example. I see the governor of New Jersey is losing weight real fast using an artificial method. I don't think we espouse that in Fairfax County, but I don't know if people are free to choose. But quite seriously, fitness avoids healthcare delivery costs. It's like the most obvious thing in the world. And I've worked big questions and little questions in my law career. 17% of the economy is healthcare delivery. And we have a way to avoid costs. It seems like you don't need an MBA or a degree in economics or statistics or microeconomics to figure this out.
Let me make 2 very brief comments, and then other folks up here, I'm sure, will want to talk. One of the issues that Virginia is trying to get in the Affordable Care Act is a wellness provision, exactly what you're talking about. And I'll come back to what did Richmond do. I carried a sheet of paper in the bill and passed unanimously, so everybody who was there voted for it, called the Blueprint for Virginia. And it talks about exactly what you're talking about. It talks about our aging population, it talks about our health, it talks about what the state can do, what the local governments can do. It is not mandatory, but it puts in place this planning document. And I think that passed 3 years, 4 years ago, something like that. But it's called Blueprint for Virginia. It's under Dr. Hazel's Secretary of Health and Human Resources. It's under his agency, and they are implementing it. Yes, sir.
Ken, since Lauren, I think, is the only voter here in my district now. And I want to start off by saying, Lauren, take a look. I've lost 25 pounds in total since January.
What's the form of it?
Seriously, the question is a very serious one. And it talks also about the importance of the Affordable Care Act. Because the Affordable Care Act is premised on the notion that keep people healthy rather than treat the sick. And that when you flip that concept around, where you keep people healthy rather than simply treatment of sick people, you in fact do reduce health care costs. And we need to have policies to do that. We've done that with smoking. I know people get into these individual liberties and so on, but you know, your secondhand smoke affects my health as well. And we've dealt with smoking. How we deal with weight, I think, is we deal with it. For example, come out tomorrow morning at West Hills Marriott. The children's organization is having an obesity conference related to what do we do in our educational programs to reduce obesity, which is an epidemic in our schools and particularly across our state. We need to take it on as a serious public policy consideration because it is costing us a huge amount of money in medicated hospital costs. So we need to take it on seriously, as I have done.
From the other electeds, any comments?
I think Ken mentioned, or Tom mentioned, the Secretary Hazel's website. Virginia's got, as a government, is one of the best web presences of any state. You might want to go on. I will Health and Human Services website, because a lot of that information is on there for the purpose that I think you pointed to. The only other thing I'll mention is anecdotally, but the doctors and the nurses and others have a day in the General Assembly building where we all can get a blood check and you can get a blood screening and do the early warning analysis to see if someone has something that needs to be looked into. The thing that always puzzled me is right after you do the blood check, they're giving you coffee with real fatty donuts. With the idea, but anyway.
I think it's little things too. I mean, all of us have websites and Facebook pages with thousands of people. Just publicize some of the things that are happening in our area. The little races, the walks. I put out the other day on breast cancer, prostate cancer, Awareness Day. Things like that, just to make people aware. It's not something that has to necessarily be a government program, but if we're sitting on, some of us are sitting on 10, 15,000 emails. Put it out there. Make sure maybe somebody forgot about it, didn't think about it. You never know. You make somebody think about it. Maybe they'll go get it checked, and that'll save them. So I think it's little things like that that we can all chip in and do.
I'm healthier than I've been in 20 years, and I contributed to campaigning. I recommend it. But really, like I said, a lot of things that you can do. I'm thinking of just ordinary annual kinds of things. I just buried a dear cousin in West Virginia last week. She died of colon cancer. She never had a colonoscopy. Simple. It's easier now and not as traumatic as we make jokes about. It's not like a root canal, they're even easier now. So doing the sensible things really is right. And I think Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, just to brag, I guess, and maybe be a little bit egotistical, kind of enlightened about our health. Lauren, I know you are, certainly. We have fitness centers in the county, the recreational centers that have everything you need. You don't need to buy a machine for your house. You can just go there almost any time of day or night. And also I hear that people that have dogs get 300 minutes more a week of exercise. I don't have a dog, but when I finish campaigning, I might get one.
Yeah, just to mention, one of the things that I think Fairfax County does very well is its afternoon school or after school programs. And I've had a chance to sit down with former school board member Mark Emery about how to expand the lessons that we've learned statewide. And so it really is a lot of benefits to that. Number one, you got a lot of kids who are getting more exercise. You have programs where kids can learn outside of the regular classroom. And quite frankly, if you take a look at when kids get in trouble, it's that time between after school and when their parents get home. And so if you can get them engaged in after school programs, there's just a multitude of benefits. And so that's something that I'd like to see Fairfax County continue to expand. But I think if we can take that very successful model and show other localities how well it's worked for Fairfax County, I think that's something that would be very good for the Commonwealth.
One thing that we haven't talked about is the difference in the economies between Fairfax counties and other parts of the state. Here we enjoy probably the most wealthy area of the entire Commonwealth. And so we have the ability, more of us have the ability to join a health club or to put our kids in after school sports. I know my daughter plays lacrosse, and you can't do that for free. So what can we do downstate? Work on economic development, making sure that we're trying to foster growth all over the state, not just in the Northern Virginia Dulles corridor. Also making sure that we're fully funding programs for kids like breakfast and lunches. I know that's been on the list before. I think we need to think about this in economic terms as well as in volunteer terms. I have enough time because my husband makes a good enough salary that I can volunteer my energy and time. Other people down in Lunenburg or Danville perhaps don't have that opportunity. They may be, looking for work or working in McDonald's all the time. We need to expand economic development all through the state. And with that, people will have more money that they have the opportunity to spend it on things that will help them stay busy. They'll have more, perhaps they can get a higher quality job where they're not working such long hours. So that's just a different perspective.
What I mentioned earlier during my talk, as a physical therapist, our job, my passion has been to teach people how to have optimal health, if they have injuries, how to optimize and get them back to their highest functioning level. Many people don't make changes unless there's a medical emergency. So you have a heart attack, suddenly you're going to stop smoking. And suddenly you're going to get on a walking program. People often don't change unless there's an emergency. Children, we're finding, have type 2 diabetes because they're obese. And so suddenly there is, oh my goodness, there's a medical emergency. And we're looking at that. The Wellness by Mason Health Initiative, it was basically for faculty, staff, and students to know their numbers. And you can do that in any area of the state. So you look at your BMI, your body mass index. They look at cholesterol. They look at blood pressure. There are students that cannot be in some of my research studies because their blood pressure is too high. They're 22 years old. They look as if their BMI is okay, but there's so much, their diet is not good. Too much Red Bull will do you in. And so education. So we start on with the little kids. We do education there. They go home and they go, Mommy, I can't eat cheese pizza 3 nights in a row. It's not going to work. So education is paramount. But anybody can go out walking. You don't need equipment. I've lost 10 pounds in the last 6 months. And it's walking. So it's education. And it started at a lower level, but you don't wait for those medical emergencies that are going to cost the greater good a lot of money. Education.
Just a very quick comment about the little kids. Mark Henry's doing things for the middle schools, but in Fairfax County, the elementary schools have such a short schedule for the week that they only allow enough time for 10 minutes of recess per day, while still meeting standards of accreditation. Now, many kids actually get longer recesses, but then they don't meet what the state standards are for the amount of school hours. That's partly because of Monday early dismissals, and they have to change that, but it's not something that should be proud of, but we only allow enough time for 10 minutes of research, which by the time we get to the playground, it's over. And that's in our voter newsletter.
Yes, ma'am.
One thing in terms of funding education, as a retired family and consumer science teacher, which used to be known as home economics, to fund that career technical education that then is part of FACS, where the nutrition is taught, the good eating habits, ways in which to prepare food, it all fits together, whether it's the exercise component, the health component, and or the nutritional component.
I think that's going to round it up. We're a little bit over. Okay, I can thank all of you for coming.
A couple of administrative announcements. One, we're going to meet next month again, the 4th Wednesday. We're going to try to get Dulles Rail and MR out to talk about Dulles Airport as an item. On the agenda that you may have gotten, we've got a couple of meetings that are coming up that are important for the citizens community to take action if they're interested. We mentioned one of them, which was the Schneider Crossroads public hearing. If you look at the agenda, it's on our website, Sully District Council. Election officials are needed, and as mentioned earlier. The other item is the County Health and Human Services Committee page has multiple items for elder citizens. Look at some of those offerings. There's scheduled meetings for the residential studios in your neighborhoods. Fairfax County is thinking about allowing studios, and they're having public outreach meetings. That's been listed. There's also discussion about libraries in Fairfax County. That's being discussed as well. There's a meeting at Centerville Library and Chantilly Library in early October. Please be aware of that. Fairfax Forward is having another public hearing. All this information is in the agenda. If you don't have a copy, go to our website. It's on the front page. And the last item is, any of you have pictures that you could make better than my little camera can make my phone that we can use to post on our site. Please contact us. I've got some pictures I can hand out. We'd love to get your pictures that are better than our pictures or my pictures. And thank you all for coming. Thank you.
I want to remind all of you that the League's nonpartisan voters guide will be published in the Fairfax Times the week of the 14th of October, and the second part the following week. So really appreciate you looking at that. It gives you information. You have the handouts. If you are interested, we welcome male and females. Thank you very much for coming.
And a round of applause again for the candidates.
The URL will be on your site. The URL will be on your site. Oh, okay. No, I didn't do a live work yet. It'll be referenced through people looking for possibly